Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks, and this is my Magicka Nightblade DPS guide. Magblade is shaping out to be the top Magicka DPS class for the Stonethorn DLC. They were already in a pretty great spot and got some nice buffs that are going to make them even stronger. In this video, I'll be going over the big changes with the latest patch, top race choices, the Mundus Stone, Vampirism, food and potions, gear, skill bars, champion points, some combat rotations, and finally we'll end with a couple of parses on the trial dummy, one from Optie showing a dynamic rotation that got him to 94.3k, and one for me showing a static rotation that got me to 92.9k. I want to give a big thanks to Optie for sharing his parse and setup with me that got him some really great results. He's a really great player and a really chill dude. Make sure to give him a follow over on Twitch and check him out here on YouTube as well. I'll have the links down in the description below. And one last thing before we get started, if you didn't already know, for the last few months I've been streaming over at Twitch as well. Come stop by and say hey if you have a chance. I'll try to keep everyone updated on Twitter when I'm going live, so I'll put the link to both of those in the description too. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. So what's changing with the Stonethorn DLC? There are quite a few juicy reworks to Nightblade, so let's dig into them. One of the biggest changes is with the skill Grim Focus. Previously this gave 2% damage mitigation for each stack gained, up to a maximum of 10%. So they're removing the mitigation and changing it to crit damage instead. So now you can get up to 10% extra crit damage when you are at 5 stacks. This is then removed when firing the spectral arrow that becomes available at 5 stacks, and you start over rebuilding them with light or heavy attacks. This is a really nice change for damage, as your spectral arrows will always fire with that extra 10% crit damage attached to them, and it's also more forgiving if you accidentally miss some light attacks or refresh the ability early, as you can just continue with your rotation and you'll end up just sitting on that extra 10% crit damage buff for a longer duration. Many people, including myself, have actually tried testing out just building to the 5 stacks and never firing off the spectral arrow just to see how the overall damage is. And to sum it up, it isn't bad, but it is a noticeable DPS loss from just using the arrow in your rotation, and sustain is much worse as well since the spectral arrow is cheaper than a regular spammable ability. You can still get some decent results with it though if you aren't comfortable consistently building the stacks with your light attacks and firing the arrow off, so it does allow for a really simple rotation that can do pretty well. Another change to this ability is that the stacks are no longer removed when leaving combat. So for example, once you have built your stacks up to 5, you could maintain that 10% crit damage indefinitely without ever needing to refresh the skill. This will be especially useful in places like Maelstrom Arena where stacks used to be removed between each wave of enemies. Another big change for Nightblades is to the Master Assassin passive. This used to require invisibility, so it wasn't used by damage dealers in PvE. Now they've changed it to just require flanking, which in ESO is when you are positioned to the side or behind an enemy. With 2 points into this passive, you gain 258 additional weapon and spell damage against a flanked enemy. Another smaller change, but a nice quality of life feature, is Darkshade now being able to be summoned without a target. Previously, you had to be targeting an enemy, and as soon as the shade was summoned, it would attack. Now it acts similarly to other pets like the Necromancer's Archer, in that you can pre-summon it out of combat and then it will wait to start attacking whenever the enemy is engaged. This is good because you can have it ready to go before the fight and get started on your burst a little quicker. And finally, we have a nice change to the Executioner passive. Previously, this passive only triggered from an ability in the Assassination skill line, but now will trigger from any damage. This should lead to a noticeable sustain increase in any fight with multiple creatures dying. Another change in this patch is with the set Medusa. This doesn't just affect Nightblades, but I found it to be a great option that you'll see me showcase later in my setup I used for my static rotation. The old version had a line of health on it, which is not wanted for PvE damage dealers, and is now replaced with all critical chance, which is currently the strongest set bonus for PvE content. It also has more crit chance on the 5-piece bonus as well, which used to only be the minor force buff. This allows you to set up your skill bars without the need for channeled acceleration or barbed trap, and you still get the minor force buff. It will be situational, as some fights are very easy to keep up either of those skills without taking away from your hard-hitting damaging abilities. In other fights, particularly ones where you might find yourself casting barbed trap or channeled acceleration multiple times while the boss is vulnerable to be attacked, Medusa could be really nice since you can just focus solely on your damaging abilities. It's also nice if you just need the extra bar space for something like a shield. I'll briefly go over Thracian Stranglers, as these did get a pretty hefty nerf. I wouldn't plan on seeing them too much for trial content anymore, though you could probably squeeze them into some 4-man dungeon or some arena builds. They now give both weapon and spell damage, but at a much lower amount than the 3000 that they are at on live servers. They also now require 50 killing blows to get to max stacks instead of 20, which just won't be possible in some content. And instead of increased damage taken and reduced healing received, they now reduce your health by 120 per stack up to a maximum of 6k less health. So you'll definitely have to alter your build around this if you do plan on getting to the full stack amount, or your health will be way too low, unless you're just planning on running normal difficulty content. I'll go over my idea for a doable Thracian setup when we get to the gear in a bit. For the race, the top 3 options we have are High Elf, Dark Elf, and Khajiit. Dark Elf is only around 0.5% and Khajiit about 3 to 4% DPS behind High Elf under normal conditions. For Bretons, they are a little further behind the top end by about 5 to 6% or so, but have the benefit of better Magicka sustain and extra spell resistance. So that might be worth it to you, just realize you will be giving up a little damage in return. Other racial options aren't recommended, but even the races with no specific benefits for dealing Magicka damage, like a Red Guard, only end up about 8 to 9% DPS behind. So you can still clear any vet content in the game with any race, but you might be making yourself work a little harder for it. For the Mundus, we are going with the Shadow. It did get a slight nerf in Stonethorn, but the 17% crit damage it offers with a full Divine's gear setup is still worth it over other options for Magblade. For Vampirism, Blood for Blood seems like it was a one-patch wonder. It was nerfed to now include a 5-second debuff, where every time you use it, you can't be healed by outside sources for 5 seconds. The other morph of it, Arterial Burst, is a pretty good, cheap spammable, but unfortunately in order to use it, you'll be increasing the cost of all of your other skills, including your ultimate. It's still a pretty nice spammable and you can make it work, but I'll probably just skip out on being a vampire this patch. Simmering Frenzy is unchanged from last patch. I won't go too in-depth into it. You can check out that section in my last Magblade video if you are curious, but it generally is a pretty clunky and unreliable ability. It can be strong if utilized properly though, and again, you'll have to deal with all of your abilities having increased costs, and personally, I'd just rather not mess with it. For the food, we're going to go with the Bistat Magicka plus health. It's the best option if you can sustain it. Preferably Artaeum pickled fishbowl, but you can also use the blue Bistat food as well at a very slight loss if the purple food is too expensive. If you've tried using sustained skills and gear and worked with your group to coordinate sustain sets, but you're still having trouble with running out of Magicka, you can also use Clockwork Citrus Fillet. This is a bit of a hit to your health and Magicka pools though, so it's really only recommended as a last resort if other sustain options have failed. For practicing your rotation on the training dummy, you should use Ghastly Eyebowl. For our potions, we're using Spell Power plus Spell Damage plus Spell Crit. For the gear, the first setup we'll go over is the setup that Optie used to get his 94.3k Parse. So we're using Maw of the Infernal for the monster set, 5-piece Mother's Sorrow, 5-piece Mantle of Sororia, and then a Maelstrom Staff on the back bar. If you don't have Perfected Sororia, it's not a huge deal. It's only about a 1.5% DPS loss. You'll just be missing that one extra line of Magicka. For the traits, we will go all Divines on the gear, and then Precise on our front bar, Infused on our back bar. For the jewelry, all 3 Bloodthirsty. Bloodthirsty did get a rework, but it is still the best trait option for Magicka DPS, especially if you have a strong execute. For the enchants, all max Magicka for the gear, all spell damage for the jewelry, and flame enchant on the front bar, weapon damage enchant on the back bar. As noted here, since Sororia and Mother's Sorrow are both light sets, all the jewelry pieces and the armor pieces are interchangeable, so if you have Sororia body pieces and Mother's Sorrow jewelry, that's just fine. If you don't yet have a Sororia staff, you can run a Mother's Sorrow staff here instead. It is a slight DPS loss, but it can be done until you get the Sororia staff. Alright, this next setup will be the one that I used in my 92.9k Parse. All of our traits and our enchants will be the same. For the monster set, we'll be using 2 light pieces, Maw of the Infernal, instead of 1 heavy, 1 medium. We'll be using 3 Mantle of Sororia body pieces, and then 2 heavy Medusa pieces. So for the Medusa pieces, you'll want either chest and legs or chest and feet to maximize your armor. And because Medusa is a heavy set, it will have to be run on our jewelry, so you cannot swap in Sororia jewelry on this setup. And same with the Mother's Sorrow setup, you can run the Medusa Infernal staff on your front bar if you don't have a Sororia one, Again, it will be a bit of a DPS loss, but it will hold you over until you get the Sororia Inferno staff. Alright, and this next setup we'll go over is for those that don't yet have trial gear. So all the enchants and traits will be the same again, and we'll use Maw of the Infernal and Mother's Sorrow on the body, Medusa on the jewelry and the front bar, and then a Maelstrom staff on the back bar. I do like this setup a little better than using a Mother's Sorrow Inferno staff, as then you'll have to do 2 heavy Medusa pieces on the body. So this setup lets you run 5-1-1, 5 light, 1 heavy, 1 medium. Whereas with Medusa on the body, you have to run 5 light and 2 heavy. So you get a little bit higher stats doing it this way. I did go ahead and include the Maelstrom Inferno staff in this build because it now drops from normal Maelstrom Arena. So if you haven't already gone and picked one up, be sure to do that. There's pretty much zero difference in the perfected and non-perfected versions of these. I did go ahead and parse in this setup to see what kind of range it would be in, and it still got really good results. Obviously not quite as good as Sororia, but 87.6k with no trial gear is pretty solid. And for this last setup, if you still want to give Thracian a go, as I said before, I think it could still be decent in 4-man or arena stuff. You can do it with any of the previous setups mentioned. You'll just drop your monster set and run one of your 5 body pieces on the head or shoulders. Then for the other head or shoulder piece, you'll run a 1-piece monster set that has spell crit like Zaan or Slimecraw. Once you have enough stacks to where your health gets down to a point where you are no longer comfortable, you can swap in a 1-piece trainee with a health enchant. You'll do this in heavy in a setup like this, or light if wearing 2 heavy Medusa body pieces. With the nerf to False God, Sorrow is slightly more damage here, but if you need the sustain, False God is not too far behind. And Sororia is obviously still great as well, just depending on how much you're running around in the dungeons you're doing, you might not want to mess with it. If you're looking for setups for specific boss fights, I highly recommend using ESO logs. It's a great website, and you can sort within the website by score for a particular trial, so you can go in and see which group did really well there, and then look at their log and see for each trash pool or each boss fight exactly what the person wore. If nothing else, it might give you some ideas of setups or skills to try that you hadn't thought of before. Now I'll go over the skill bar options. I won't go through all the passives in this video, but I will have all of the essential ones listed in the description below. If you find yourself confused about what skills these are or what they morph from, I definitely recommend checking out ESOskillbook.com. It has all the skills listed, it's easily searchable, and everything is always up to date. Alright, for the first bar setup, we'll go over the setup used in Optie's Parse, and he uses Degeneration, Impale, Crippling Grasp, Ellie Weapon, Merciless Resolve, and then Incapacitating Strike for our ultimate. Incap is the stamina morph, but it does provide a lot of extra regen. If you don't need that regen, you can also run Soul Harvest there instead. It's the Magicka morph. Another thing to note is that he's using degen here because he's not able to sustain Mystic Orb with this rotation, but in a trial where sustain is a little bit better, you'll want to run Orb there. On the back bar, we're using Siphoning Attacks, Unstable Wall, Twisting Path, Barbed Trap, Dark Shade, and then our ultimate again will be Incap. For the skill bar setup for the parse I did in Medusa, we're doing Siphoning Attacks, Inner Light, Impale, Ellie Weapon, Merciless Resolve, and Incapacitating Strike as our ultimate. And then on the back bar, Siphoning Attacks, Unstable Wall, Twisting Path, Mystic Orb, Dark Shade, and Incap again as our back bar ult. If you're looking for a bit safer, more defensive skill bar setup, you can use this one right here as well, and I'll have all these listed in the description below. For the champion points, the blue CP that Optie used in his parse is 64 Elemental Expert, 66 Elfborn, 9 Spell Erosion, 72 Master at Arms, 39 Staff Expert, and 20 Thaumaturge. The CP I used is 56 Elemental Expert, 52 Elfborn, 10 Spell Erosion, 61 Master at Arms, 16 Staff Expert, 72 Thaumaturge, and 3 Piercing. This CP relies more on your target being set off balance on cooldown and uses the Exploiter passive in CP, which gives you 10% more damage against off balance enemies. So definitely feel free to just use whichever one works best for you and your group. For the amount of spell penetration you need from the Spell Erosion tree, just make sure to coordinate with your group so that you're hitting a total of 18,200 penetration. So you might need to add or remove some points from Spell Erosion to hit that mark. And as always, for the red and the green tree, these are based on the content that you're running and personal preference, so you'll need to adjust those accordingly. This is just a generic setup for running content if you don't want to change it around. Now I'll go over the dynamic rotation that Optie used in his 94k Parse. He opens up with pre-buffing Merciless Resolve, Siphoning Attacks, Dark Shade, and Barbed Trap, and then starts the rotation with Unstable Wall, Bar Swap, Crippling Grasp, Bar Swap, Twisting Path, Bar Swap, Degeneration, and then the ultimate, and then the Spectral Arrow fires, and then 5 spammables, followed by the Spectral Arrow firing. You'll notice that he fires the Spectral Arrow on his 6th light attack instead of his 5th, and this is generally considered a better way to do it if you do have high ping. What it does is guarantee that you won't accidentally refresh your Merciless Resolve instead of firing the Spectral Arrow, and this way it's guaranteed to fire every time you try to shoot it. After this point in the rotation, he keeps up all of his dots dynamically as they run out. So if multiple abilities do end up ending at the same time, the high priority ones are Unstable Wall, Twisting Path, and Merciless Resolve. The medium priority is Dark Shade, and then the low priority abilities are Crippling Grasp, Degeneration, and Siphoning Attacks. So this means if you have 2 of those that are running out at the exact same time, you'll want to refresh the higher priority one first. And if you are running Orb over Degeneration here, you'll put that one in the high priority category as well. For Execute, we're dropping all of our dots except for Unstable Wall, Twisting Path, and Barbed Trap, and we'll only cast Dark Shade at the start of Execute. We'll swap in Impale instead of our normal spammable, and try to only use our ultimate when we have more than 5 seconds left on all of our dots. This is actually a good thing to attempt through the whole rotation, although with it being dynamic, it won't be possible every single time. But the general idea is that all your dots will be running so that when you use your ultimate ability and get the 20% damage increase, all you'll have to do is use spammables or your spectral arrows, or if you're an execute, just only impales. For my static rotation, this is using Medusa, so we don't have to use Barbed Trap or Channeled Acceleration. So we open up with Dark Shade, Siphoning Attacks, and Merciless Resolve as our pre-buff. And then for the remaining rotation, we'll use Unstable Wall, Twisting Path, Orb, and then Bar Swap. And then we'll use our ultimate and fire our Spectral Arrow, and then 4 spammables and fire the Spectral Arrow again. And then we'll Bar Swap and do our Unstable Wall, Twisting Path, Orb, and then we'll be casting our shade a little bit early here, but for the rest of the rotation, it should be falling off right as we get to it. Then we'll Bar Swap and fire the Spectral Arrow, and then if you don't need any sustain help, you just do 4 spammables here and fire your Spectral Arrow, but if you do need the sustain, you'll use your Siphoning Attack, and then 3 spammables, and then the Spectral Arrow. If you get to the point in your rotation where you're supposed to cast your ultimate and it's not quite ready, go ahead and just do a spammable there and then fire your Spectral Arrow in the same spot as it shows in the rotation, and then the ultimate should be ready by then. You can use it there, followed by 3 spammables and then another Spectral Arrow. Execute here is pretty similar, except we don't have Trap to keep up. I do recast Shade as long as I'm going to get the full duration out of it. If I'm not, then I will go ahead and let it just drop off and stay off. We also want to make sure here that we have 5+ seconds on our dots before using our ultimate. And then Orb can actually be really nice to keep up as well if you have a target with a big enough hitbox where every tick will hit the boss. Otherwise, go ahead and just drop that as well. Well, all right, that's going to be the end of this guide. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or to stop by my Twitch stream. I'll start with the parse from Optie, and then I'll put mine following it, and timestamps will all be in the description below as well if you want to review a specific one. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Everybody do the G. 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 Yeah, I feel my heartbeat racing. I'm pacing back and forth, trying not to face it. I'm chasing the facts. I just can't relax, cause my mind's on the fast stacks. I'm talking cash. Yeah, I know there's more to this life than the money, but it's funny how the paper make a rainy day sunny and dry it all up like a nose that ain't runny. Been a while since I was 20 and was acting like a dummy. Always had this vision I would be in the neon. It turned me on, so I turned the beat on, and I decided to keep it cool like free on. Now you see my face when you turn the TV on. I'm so special, call me special ed. My life is an adventure like Bill and Ted. So get out your bed, lift up your head, open up your eyes. I'm coming like a sunrise. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. Man, I feel my heartbeat racing. Man, I feel my forehead filling up with sweat. And I bet if I took a second glance, wouldn't leave it up to chance. It's a go get a romance. Buried to my music, I hope I never lose it. Give me time and sound to show you how to use it. So crawl up in your minds and open up the blinds. Let the light shine in upon a million lives. Yeah, it's crazy how some people still act. No tag, treating all of their opinions like facts. Just relax, sit back, don't worry about the drama. I love my mama, I want change like Obama. Yeah, I'm a bit strange, I play my own game, doing the same thing. Turn out a bit lame, ain't it just a shame? So many people tame